belly. Baby girl, I need my seat. Look at this little kitten. Look at little Pepsi. Oh, it's so bright. Oh, you want to get down? Okay. All right. What a deal. Hi. Hello, hello. Yeah? Okay, yeah, sit on my lap. Good girl. So I want to talk about how I lost, it was like 50 pounds approximately, over about, it was about 8 months that I lost that weight, and I did it without going to the gym. You know, I had a very normal, like, woman in their 20s, kind of early 20s kind of weight gain, right? You know, you get into a relationship and you gain weight. That's usually how it works. So like through high school, my weight would fluctuate between like 130-ish to like 145-ish, depending on what was going on. And I'm like almost 5'8", so that is like a healthy weight for me, is like probably 140 to 145. I think I was a little too skinny when I was about 130 looking back. And at my heaviest, which I hit in 2014 to 2015, I was like 180 to 190 approximately. I honestly I've never really been someone that's weighed themselves all that often, so that was just like a guess based on like when I was like forced to weigh myself or when I happened to do it. I know the heaviest I ever saw it was like 190. And, you know, of course, in 2014, I also got engaged. And so the pressure of a wedding was kind of looming. Billy and I were engaged for about 2.5 years. And of course, I procrastinated like the wedding weight loss because, you know, everybody's like, I don't want to like feel, you know, fat at my wedding or whatever. I at the end or like the middle of 2016, because we got married in October of 2016, I finally got my shit together and was like, okay, like we're doing this, we're losing weight. And the thing was, I had attempted, of course, many times before that. I had all of the normal guilt Pinterest boards associated with me feeling like my body was unhealthy and that I was overweight and all of these things. And I was overweight. I had all of the symptoms of being overweight. You know, my lungs, my asthma was really bad. My knees and my hips and my feet would hurt if I stood for extended periods of time. You know, I didn't feel good. I didn't feel good at all. And I had gone through like other diets. Like I had tried to do like paleo and like all that kind of stuff, and they never really stuck. And then, you know, like finally, I think between stress of 2016, because there was a lot of things going on. Billy's mom passed away a couple months before we got married. And we moved from Seattle back to Utah. And this all happened within like a few months. And I think something in my brain, like in a weird way, kind of just like broke finally. And I was like, okay, I'm done being sick. And it was almost like a way to like, you know, control something in my life finally. And so about 3 months before our wedding, I went on like it was like carb-free diet, okay? By the way, you need to watch this all the way through the end if you're deciding to judge me right now. Especially because although I have, just as a caveat to all of this, I have not stayed carb-free in my life and I say like absolutely not. I eat bread. I eat rice. I'll talk about my current diet. And despite that, for the last 4 years, I have managed to keep my weight at around 140. Of course, prior to being pregnant, I of course now have gained about 25 pounds because I am in my 3rd trimester. So I did it was like just absolutely carb free. Okay. I did this because in the past, when I had done like my half-assed attempts at dieting, I had noticed that after I got through that initial like withdrawal phase from carbohydrates, that I usually would feel better. Like my brain would feel better and my body, I would have much more energy to do things. I would feel less depressed, that kind of thing. And also because other people in my family, like my mom, for example, when she often would do like low or no carb diets, that she felt better. And my hypothesis is that you should always look to your family members, and especially from those who you are descended, parents and grandparents, to see what kind of things work for them in their diet, because, you know, I'm a genetic replica of them. I honestly, in retrospect, I don't know exactly. I don't know how at that time had the willpower to do it. Because anybody who's ever tried doing this knows that it's extremely difficult. And I was eating a huge amount of processed foods prior to that. Because that's the thing, right? Is that when you go low carb, you kind of want to like murder everyone for a period of time as you go through these withdrawals. Research has shown that withdrawals from carbohydrates, especially refined sugars, like simple sugars, like cane sugar and things like that, the withdrawals are similar to people who are withdrawing from intense drug use, like methamphetamines and cocaine and things like that. And you feel awful, and it's all you can think about, and you go through that period for like 4 weeks ish. At the time that I was doing it, I found diet sodas to be incredibly helpful. Even now, I still find diet sodas to be incredibly helpful. And if you want to at me on that, I can make another video about why aspartame is not bad for you. I didn't eat, so I ate fruit. I didn't eat a ton of it, but I ate fruit. That was like pretty much the only carbohydrate that I would eat. I would eat a lot of citrus, and I would eat apples and bananas because you still need vitamins. Like, I'm not stupid. So I would eat that stuff. But then I would eat a lot of meat, and I would eat beans a little bit. What else did I eat? I ate a lot of vegetables, and I ate a lot of fat. Anything that was like in the fat category, because that's what would keep me feeling full. And I honestly just did not eat a ton. I would eat maybe 1,300 calories a day, and I felt good. I felt good while it was going on. Once I got past that withdrawal phase from the carbohydrates, I felt good eating about 13 to maybe 1,500 calories a day. So we got to the wedding in the end of October in 2016, and I, in that 3-month period, lost. It was a lot of weight. It was like, I'm sorry that I don't weigh myself, but I'm pretty sure it was somewhere between like 15 and 20 pounds. It was like, looking at me, you could see a noticeable difference. The thing that I noticed more than anything was that I felt like my body was not swollen. Okay? I lost 2 ring sizes in that time. And I didn't feel like the ring size was proportionate to like how the rest of my body was losing weight. Like, I was losing weight, but I also just felt like there was inflammation that was going away. So the first thing that happened that was kind of clued me onto what was going on exactly with my body was that I, on my wedding day, I, for the first time in months, broke some of those rules, right? It's my wedding. I'm gonna eat cake, right? And I So I remember like I had my wedding dress on and it had like a corset, kind of like it had boning in it, bonings, I don't know. It had boning in it, okay? And at the beginning of the day, I felt really great. And then while we were all getting ready, the groomsmen or somebody went out and got McDonald's and brought it back. And I ate a couple French fries and I had a hamburger, right? And then all I remember, which is really frustrating because it was my wedding and I was in a huge amount of pain all of a sudden, was that my stomach started to bloat. Like I remember sitting down, and my wedding dress had fit me fine that morning, right? I was absolutely fine. I remember sitting down after the ceremony to eat, and I felt like I was gonna bust out of my dress because my midsection was so bloated. And it hurt. It hurt because on the inside, like my intestines were burning, and then on the outside, the boning was like stabbing me, right? And I was like, what the fuck is going on? This is so annoying, right? And then, I ignored it and enjoyed my wedding. But it was not very fun. I remember my stomach hurting for a couple days after that. That being said, the day after, I did immediately go back to the diet that I had been on before. I was no carb, right? So, no bread, no rice, no potatoes, no refined, especially no refined sugars, honey, anything like, no honey, no maple syrup, no nothing. Within a couple days, I started to feel good again. And at this point, I was like, I'm going to stick to this. Right? There's no reason not to. I'm doing a good job with this. I had just started a new job, and so I was really busy and distracted, and I was like, okay, let's go with it, right? So at some point in the next couple months, I realized, and I think it was the day that and by the way, I continued to lose weight very rapidly. I was at my mom and dad's house, and they had made a soup, and it had potatoes in it. And in my mind, I was like, I'm just, I'll just not eat the potatoes, right? I'll just eat the soup, and I won't eat potatoes. And again, 3 hours later, I was in so much pain. It was literally like I could feel my stomach, not even my intestine, I could feel my stomach like expanding, and then right after that my intestines, like my intestines would hurt, and where I felt it was my lower back and my hips, okay? And it occurs to me that perhaps I am allergic to potatoes, which is a weird thing to be allergic to. I've personally never met anyone that's allergic to potatoes. And so it was, it was strange. And I went and talked to my mom, and I was like, is this like a thing? Can people be allergic to potatoes? And we talked about it, and like she and I had, she is super intelligent. She's, a science teacher, a biologist, right? And in the past, we had wondered whether or not people in our family were like nightshade intolerant. And if you don't know what nightshade foods are, it's a type of plant that produces poisonous berries, depending on which version of the plant it is. So potatoes specifically are the root of a type of nightshade plant. And actually, if you eat the berries that grow on the plant, because of course the potato is the root, right? It could kill you depending on how much you eat, but it will make you extremely sick. The berries are quite toxic. But there are other foods in the nightshade family. There are tomatoes and like almost all kinds of peppers are nightshade foods. And I had continued to eat spice, right? I would have jalapenos, I would have tomatoes, like I said, I still ate fruit, right? And all those are fruits, peppers and tomatoes are fruit, right? and hadn't noticed anything. So in my head, it was like, well, I can't be nightshade intolerant, but these potatoes are making me really sick. And it was confirmed over the next couple days when TMI, if you don't like hearing about bowel movements, then you have an unscientific brain and you should fast forward through the rest of this video. What would happen was that I would like feel like I had to poop, and I would go sit down on the toilet and nothing would happen. It was just like this huge amount of pressure, and it just hurt, and it ached and it ached and it ached. And I was like, okay, this is like not normal. Okay. So I started to do research on whether or not I might be allergic to potatoes. And what I discover is that potatoes themselves are actually quite toxic, especially the type of potatoes that we grow in the United States. When we can kind of brush over this for the time being, I'll just give you the short version. And by the way, do not read into this and think that I am against GMOs, because GMOs have solved a lot of problems for food on our planet and like feeding the billions of people that live on this planet. And not only that, but we've been genetically modifying our food for like literally thousands of years. So I'm not against I'm not against GMOs, but in this particular instance, I think it's worth mentioning that we may have inadvertently made our potatoes much more toxic by modifying them genetically. So we have our white potatoes from the nightshade family in this country. We've actually altered their genetic code to make them pest resistant. But the thing that makes them pest resistant is also the thing that makes them more toxic to humans. There are also, though, that being said, there's not a lot of research on people who are allergic to potatoes, because I don't think it's super common. Well, okay, I think it's actually quite common, and people just don't know that they're allergic because no one is talking about it, which is why I'm making this video. So over the next couple months, I noticed that I would have exposures to potatoes in varying ways that I had not anticipated, and I would gain 2 pant sizes in a matter of hours. I would get so bloated, and my back would hurt so much, and my hips would hurt so much. I would get hives on the inside of my mouth, and I started figuring out all of these things that I couldn't eat anymore. The first thing was fried food, right? I couldn't eat pretty much any fried food because they almost always fry potato products in the same oil as they fry other foods. The other thing that I discovered is that a huge amount of our processed ingredients are byproducts of potatoes as well. Like the majority of sugar alcohols are made from potatoes, and our other sweeteners that are not low calorie, like maltodextrin, is in so many things. Food starch, potato starch, lactic acid, all of these things that are just like in all of our foods. And I couldn't eat any of them. It took me until probably the end of 2018, to be honest, to actually figure out all of these things. Because there's like no real like list that I found online of like, these are all the things that potatoes are made from potatoes, and here's what to look out for. Like that kind of stuff exists for people with celiacs. It does not exist yet for people who have potato intolerances. And so it was a lot of trial and error. Like I would eat something new and then I'd be like, wow, I just got really sick. And then I would go and I would look up literally all of the ingredients. I would go to the Wikipedia pages and I would be like, what is this a byproduct of? And then sure enough, I would be like, oh, this is made from potatoes, surprise. And I'm like hella sick. So I, over the course of this 2-year period from like the middle of 2016 to the end of 2018, so like 2.5 years, I realized that part of the reason that I had struggled with the weight, even when I had tried diets before, was because, I wouldn't lose weight even when I dieted, and there were times in the past when I would exercise heavily and I still would not lose weight. was because my body was inflamed and I was sick. In retrospect, I spent the entirety of my life living, first of all, with hives on the inside of my mouth. Every time I ate potatoes, now that I recognize what it was, but at the time I didn't notice. I would just, because people eat potatoes in their food so much, it was, for me, it was just like I thought it was something that happened every time I ate, pretty much. I would get cracks on my tongue. My tongue is still healing from them. Someone once told me that they thought I had a geographic tongue, and then the doctor looked at it and they were like, no, that's not what that is. I'm not sure what's wrong with your tongue. Turns out I was having allergic reactions all the time. I also, when I was younger, I would get sent to chiropractors all the time because I was constantly having low back pain. Like as a 12-year-old, I was going to a chiropractor because my back was hurting. Like, I'm 12 years old. Why does my back hurt so much? And it would like incapacitate me. It was horrible. The pain was awful. Turns out, not my muscles, it was my intestines. They were sick. They were sick all the time. I also had problems with eczema as well. That largely, with an asterisk to that, because there are other things that cause my eczema, that trigger my eczema now. The eczema went away, right? I would always get it on my elbows, the ends of my elbows here. They would just flake and flake. I would have a patch on the back of my neck. I would get it on my knuckles. And it just went away. It went away. I ended up settling down at about 140 pounds. And when I realized that, like, hey, this is a healthy weight for me, it looks like maybe it was the potatoes that were making me sick, I started to add back in other carbohydrates. So I added, I started eating bread again, rice. I added a lot more beans. I mean, rice and beans actually still is it's still like a solid staple in my diet. Because it's cheap and it's tasty and easy. But I realized that even after I was adding these other things back in, that I was not gaining weight. So I, at this point, still was, and I mean at this point, I mean like the middle to like end of 2018, like the middle of 2018. By that point, I had added back in complex carbohydrates. I also was eating more fruit than I had been eating before. And I felt really good. And then life got really stressful again. And Billy and I both lost our jobs in the same month. And we, yeah, it was really fun, let me tell you. And, stress leads to varying coping mechanisms, and for me that was adding larger amounts of refined sugars back into my diet. Like I was eating like ice cream bars. I would I remember going to the grocery store, and in the end of 2018, and I would buy like 2 or 3 boxes of these, sorry, I just got clawed in the leg. Hi, I'm all for you stretching out, but if you stretching out means that you have to grasp onto my legs with your tiny claws. Hi, oh, you getting down? I'm sorry. She's mad at me because I moved my legs. Oh, please don't start wallering. I'm so close to being done 30 minutes later. So I, what was I saying? I would buy, and I'm literally like 2 or 3 boxes of these, they were like coconut, or no, it was cashew milk. Oh, cashew milk is really good, by the way. Except in coffee. Billy likes it in coffee, I think. I don't really like it. I like oat milk in coffee. these cashew milk chocolate bars. I can't think about them for too long because it makes me want to go to the store and buy them. And they, you know, like the ice cream bars, like on the stick, right? And they, oh man, they were so good. They're so good. They had like all these different flavors, right? And I hadn't eaten desserts in 2 years at this point, and I was feeling like shit. So I was like, I'm just gonna eat them and like, F it, right? And I got really sick again. I started to gain weight extremely quickly. I think in a matter of like 3 or 4 weeks, I gained probably 15 pounds. Because that being said, I was eating like, I don't want you to think I was like binging on them, but I was eating like maybe 1 to 2 ice cream bars a day, which, considering that I had in the 2 years prior to that had eaten no refined sugar except for like in very tiny amounts, I was having maybe less than 5 grams a day, which is like literally nothing. That's like if you buy normal bread, that's like 2 pieces of bread. It's like 5 grams of refined sugar. No, not complex carbohydrates, but like cane sugar, right? Refined sugar. So I got really sick, and an interesting thing happened. I had not had problems with my asthma in the 2 years that I had been on this adjusted diet, despite the fact that for the first time in my life, I had started living with cats. I was extremely allergic to cats when I was younger. And I couldn't be around them. I couldn't eat people who owned cats were not allowed to sit on my bed. Yeah. So at the time when I started eating the sugar again, I had 4 cats living in my house. And the thing that was astonishing was that I went to, like, they could sleep in my bed with me, and I had no problems. And like Annie even insisted on like sleeping next to my head, to having to suck on my inhaler like 8 times a day because I was constantly having asthma attacks. And I was like, wow, what the fuck? I was fine. What's changed? And then all of a sudden it occurs to me, like, and I'm like looking at the time we were filming YouTube videos for our other channel, and I remember like looking, I was editing the videos and I was like, wow, my face looks really bloated. And I'm like, oh, you've gained weight. And I went and got on the scale, and sure enough, I gained weight. And I was like, okay, I don't think I can eat refined sugars. I think something is wrong, and I think it's affecting my asthma. I wasn't having like the intestinal pain, right? That was something that was strictly potato related. Oh, Billy's home. I quickly discovered that this addition of the refined sugars back into my diet was what was making me sick again. And so it was making my asthma really bad. And also was the reason that I had gained weight again quite rapidly. So immediately I cut all refined sugars out of my diet. And it wasn't fun again. Like, you have to go through withdrawals again. It wasn't quite as severe. And at this point I realized that even when I was eating like really small amounts, that I was still having reactions to it. And it was anything that was like corn syrup or cane sugar. And I wanted to know why. Like, in my head, it didn't make sense to me that I could eat like fruit, which has fructose in it, and eat quite a bit of fruit and not get sick. But if I had like 3 grams of cane sugar, then my body would like suddenly be on fire. Okay. So through my research, I discovered 2 things. The first thing that I learned is about the glycemic index. So the glycemic index is a scale that was invented a long time ago, at least 100 years ago, I think, maybe even longer than that. I can't really remember. And originally it was a scale of 1 or like 0 to 100. And the way that it works is that it measures how quickly your body digests and breaks down, and then conversely then turns into energy any kind of carbohydrate. Okay, that's what the glycemic index is, or glucose really is what it is. Glucose is sugar. And so like fructose has a glycemic index of, I think, approximately 20, so it's fairly low on the scale. Honey has a glycemic index of about 50 to 60. Real maple syrup, not corn syrup maple syrup, but true maple syrup from a tree, has a glycemic index of, I think, about 50 or 60 also. And then cane sugar has, it's at 70. And corn syrup, this is all just based on the last time I looked at it, which was a couple weeks ago, so I could be off on these, but I think I'm kind of right. I'm at least close. Corn syrup is pretty bad. It has a glycemic index of 80. And then there's other processed sugars like maltodextrin, which was invented in the last, it was discovered 30 or 40 years ago, and they actually had to increase the scale of the glycemic index because maltodextrin is 110 on the scale. And what this means is that your cane sugar, for example, cane sugar being at a 70 or 75 and fructose being at a 20 means that if you eat 2 grams of cane sugar versus 2 grams of fructose, that the cane sugar is going to be turned into potential energy way faster and way easier than the fructose is. I will explain why this is in a second. And what this also means too is that if you either don't have a metabolism that needs to burn that much energy at once, or you are, sedentary, you're not running a marathon or something and you don't use that energy, then your body turns that extra energy into fat usually. So the glycemic index, as far as glucose and carbohydrates are concerned, is the determiner for good and bad carbohydrates, okay? The basic reason for why this is because fructose, for example, the glucose molecules are surrounded by other things that make them harder to digest. They have fiber and all of these other things, and so your body doesn't get to them as quickly. And by the time it does, it's okay, I do need the sugar, because your body needs glucose to function. It absolutely needs glucose to function. And which is also why too, if there are some people who, if they because I've discovered I have a very slow metabolism. I don't need to eat a lot of calories in a day. But there are some people who have very fast metabolisms, and if they go on low carb, extremely low carb diets, like what I did perhaps when I lost a lot of weight, that they do not function very well because they need more sugar, which is why I really, everybody needs to figure out what works for them. That being said, from the research that I've seen, and in my own personal experience, anything over a glycemic index of about 50 or 60, so the honey to maple syrup category, I end up having allergic reactions as a byproduct of them. And this brings me to the second thing that I discovered about eating sugar that my body cannot use. So the first thing, right, of course, the first thing that I talked about, the glycemic index, that's what causes you to gain weight when you eat excess carbohydrates. But the thing that made me sick specifically was that there are like billions and billions and billions of bacteria that live in everyone's intestines, and they are extremely helpful. Some of those bacteria, especially some in the yeast varieties of bacteria, and by the way, there's a lot that we don't know about them because the research on this topic is still kind of new, unfortunately. There are certain kinds of bacteria in your intestines that when they digest those simple sugars, and you have to have, the food in your body has to be digested by those bacteria first in order for you to absorb the nutrients out of them. It's like a symbiotic, right? Is that right? Symbiotic relationship? Is that the right word?
Yeah, symbiotic.
Symbiotic, yeah. It's a symbiotic relationship. So the bacteria in our intestines are fed by the food that we feed them, and then as a byproduct of that, we also get to enjoy the breakdown of the nutrients that we can more easily absorb through our intestinal walls. So we need them, but the problem with it is that some of these bacteria, especially the ones that like to digest these simple sugars, they will produce histamines as a byproduct of, as kind of like you think about like their feces, okay? It's one of the things that they will produce as a part of this process. And histamines are the things in our bodies that trigger allergic responses. It's the thing that tells, like, my body sees histamines and it's like, we need to have an allergic reaction, all right? That's the thing that makes me have an asthma attack when I'm around cats. And you know, people who are allergic to grass, like your histamines response, right? That's why like Benadryl, right, is an antihistamine, is because it helps to get rid of these things. There is also research that has shown not only that do these bacteria produce histamines as a byproduct of their digestion of certain sugars, but there's also research that has shown that the majority of our serotonin levels are actually, and the hormone serotonin, which is a very important serotonin, or a very important hormone for your body. It's like people who are who struggle with depression have problems with their serotonin levels, and not only just serotonin also, but there were a lot of our hormones are produced in our intestinal tract. And that the food that we eat affects how much of these hormones we release. And what I have found personally also was that my depressive episodes would get significantly worse, like way worse, when I was eating these refined sugars. At the time, in like the end of 2018, it was the first time that I had been kind of suicidal in like 2 or 3 years, maybe even more than that, which I can talk about in a different video. And I do think that a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was eating the sugar again. And when I stopped and my body got healthy again and my hormones went back to normal, I felt way less depressed. And since then have not had a problem. So to summarize, potatoes and refined sugars are bad for you, possibly. Too much refined sugars are not good for anyone. It doesn't matter who you are. Just you might be able to tolerate more than me, for example. Like my husband, he can tolerate more refined sugars and he doesn't get sick and he doesn't gain weight rapidly because he has different intestinal flora than I do and he has different genetics. And but for me, I can't do that. If you're someone who's struggling, especially with feeling like no matter what you do, you can't lose weight and you're hopping diet to diet and things like that, I would say go look at the glycemic index and do not eat anything that's over 50. Just don't do it. Don't eat any of it. And just see what happens. Just see what happens. And also, too, if you have the symptoms of being allergic to potatoes, which I don't think I've even mentioned all of them, but intestinal pain, like lower back and hip pain, eczema, insomnia is also, it's because the toxic, I think it's like an amino acid or something that it's toxic in those potatoes. It also is a stimulant as well. So if you're struggling with that, it could be because of potatoes. Or if you are just not feeling good and you want to try it out and see what happens, I highly recommend trying this, because I think that there are probably a lot of people who on this planet that probably share my allergy and just don't know it. So yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. Maybe I'll put a list in the description of like foods, like potato ingredients, if y'all want to try it out. Oh, actually, one of my friends discovered that she is allergic to potatoes. I forgot about that. BJ, Barbara can't eat potatoes. So if y'all have questions about any of this, let me know. I have like a lot of information about this that I have had to research myself pretty much over the last 3 or 4 years, and I'm more than happy to share it, because it really frustrates me that the world is so unhealthy right now. And your diet affects everything that you do, everything. And I don't think there's anything more fundamentally important than making sure that you're healthy and that you feel good. So let me know. Hope this doesn't suck.